You've just gotten off the phone with your friend who told you about some new thing they bought. And immediately after the call, you see an advertisement for this exact thing. Now, 20 years ago, you might have thought that this was a coincidence, but today, it is obvious that something was listening to your call and sending you this ad directly. Do you feel like you have any semblance of privacy today? If you are a few decades into your earthly journey like me, you might even remember a time before when privacy was a given, when privacy was something you had to choose to give away. You're probably wondering, like me, what happened to privacy and what's killing it so effectively. If you'd like to know why your phone knows what to advertise to you, or if you want to see why every purchase requires a login with all kinds of personal information, or maybe you wonder how every telemarketer and scammer that calls you seems to have a shocking amount of accurate details about your life. If any of these and 100 other privacy-related questions nag at you like they do me, then this video is for you. In this video, I'll break down first what privacy is, defined, and what kinds of privacy rights you might have. Then we'll explore what changed between the days of relative anonymity and today. And then I'll explore why our privacy is in tatters in 2020's America and why it will remain under attack for the foreseeable future. And don't worry, in conclusion, I'll give you some tips and methods you can use to safeguard your privacy. Now, before I tell you why nothing is private anymore, I do want to make sure that you know that as someone born in 1980, I consider myself part of the Xennial generation. I aim to explore concepts through this channel from our unique perspective, since Xennials are the only generation raised both analog and digital. My videos showcase my philosophical understanding of the subject, supplemented with verifiable facts and information to support my beliefs. If you disagree or have something to add, I welcome your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. As always, there are chapters in the description that will let you skip to any section you want. Thanks for checking out my creation, and if you're new here at the Xennial Philosopher, I hope you'll subscribe and return soon to continue to expand your perception and grow your mind alongside me. What is privacy, and do you have any rights? First, like always, I will define and try to encapsulate the concept of privacy before I start telling you all about the rights and protections you may or may not have. The word privacy is a noun, and as defined by Webster's is the quality of being apart from company or observation, or freedom from unauthorized intrusion. Both work. In America, the land of the free, we don't pass laws or regulations designed to protect normal people, especially if those rules would negatively affect any corporate profits. As a result of this aversion to helping individuals, there are very few privacy laws in the US, and those that exist are very weak, but let's review them so you at least know what rights you have. For example, your medical records, which are entirely digital these days, are protected by the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, much more commonly known as HIPAA. Your personally identifiable information, abbreviated to just PII, includes credit card numbers and your social. GLBA and COPPA ostensibly protect PII and children online, and the U.S. Privacy Act of 1974 restricts PII government agencies' hold. But as you'll see in the rest of this section, the regulations in America are at best a band-aid on a gunshot wound, and much more likely, wholly ineffective and useless. If you're a non-American watching this, you have privacy protections that make ours look like a joke. You are more protected than Americans and can safely skip this section, unless you plan to come here for some reason. For the rest of you, I think the easiest way to go through this is to go through the 4 major US privacy laws in the order in which they were introduced. Which means that we start with the US Privacy Act of 1974. This one won't take long to cover since it was passed before the internet was even a thing. Still, the Justice Department sums it up well. The 1974 Privacy Act prohibits the disclosure of a record about an individual from a government system of records absent the written consent of the individual, unless the disclosure is under one of 12 statutory exceptions, meaning in practice they can share whatever they want, they just need to find the right excuse. There was a long dry spell after the 1974 Act, presumably because Republicans ran the executive branch for much of the intervening years between 1974 and the next act passed in 1996. But in the 90s, the US finally had another progressive president in the form of Bill Clinton. So, in 1996, with the digitization of medical records on the horizon, the US government passed the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act with the intent of protecting the privacy of your medical records as they were transferred to electronic health record systems. HIPAA struggles like all US regulations related to technology. The authors didn't know what the future held and seem to have had a tenuous grasp of the concepts they were trying to regulate. To begin with, HIPAA was written in 1996. And if you are as old as me, you'll remember clearly that computing in 1996 was very different from today. So you'll be able to surmise easily that these regulations are outdated, and any healthcare organization that meets the HIPAA requirements is sorely hurting from a security standpoint, which means your privacy is at a significant risk precisely because of the outdated nature of this anemic regulation. Towards the end of Clinton's second term, the administration was able to help push through 2 more pieces of privacy legislation: GLBA in 1999 and COPPA in 2000. GLBA, which stands for Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, is sometimes just called the Financial Modernization Act of 1999, which specifies how financial institutions deal with your individual private information. Finally, the most recent regulation passed in America was COPPA, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, passed in 2000. The FTC enforces COPPA, and they explain the purpose of the act like this. COPPA imposes certain requirements on operators of websites or online services directed to children under 13 years of age, and on operators of other websites or online services that have actual knowledge that they are collecting personal information online from a child under 13. This is why websites will regularly ask you if you're over 13. There is a key theme among all 4 of America's privacy laws. They are weak, outdated, and unable to keep up with technology in any meaningful way. Many US states do have their own privacy regulations, with California being the leader. Still, state regulations stop at the state border, and most transactions these days are interstate, if not international. Additionally, there are some voluntary privacy regulations like PCI DSS that are written, maintained, and enforced by a commercial group. I'll close this section by telling you something I said thousands of times to InfoSec and pen testing clients. Meeting and passing any written standard or regulation will never be enough to keep you and your customers safe. Proper security and, by extension, privacy for them necessitates going far above and beyond what is legally required. Or, more simply, compliance does not equal security. Now, privacy wasn't always under such constant threat as today. Something changed between the acts that Clinton helped to get through and today, and this next section will explore that. What killed privacy? In the last section, we looked at some of the protections the US government has created and how those regulations are ultimately inadequate to keep your data secure. But what changed? Why are companies so quick to collect so much information? And why is so much of our personally identifiable information available to anyone looking for it? Why don't these protections help? There is a short answer, and if that's what you want, here it is. It comes down to capitalism being allowed to run rampant, coupled with an unregulated Wild West-like tech industry that is hoovering up our data faster than ever while having little to no incentive to keep that data safe. But if you're watching my videos, you don't want the superficial answer. You want to know the realities behind this problem. So let's take a look. First, as discussed in the last section, the various regulations and frameworks allegedly designed to protect our sensitive information are trash. They don't stop attackers. They barely regulate the industries they purport to control. And when a violation is found, the punishment is typically ineffective and pointless. For example, dozens of significant security breaches have made major headlines in the last few decades. As I talk about a few of these attacks, you'll note that they all significantly impacted people's privacy, while the organizations responsible almost unanimously got away with either a proverbial slap on the wrist or no consequences. Let's start with an attack directly related to the 1974 Privacy Act, the OPM hack. OPM is the US government's Office of Personnel Management. OPM is responsible for maintaining the complete and accurate records of all government employees and contractors, past and present. This means they maintain an exceptionally detailed database of not just who works for the government, but every conceivable data point on each of them. For example, as someone who served in the US Army and maintained a security clearance, that database lists, among other details, every place I've ever lived, all my bank accounts, medical records, details of my FBI background check, and of course, my fingerprints and DNA. Well, back in 2013, Chinese nation-state hackers gained access to OPM systems, and over 2 years, they exfiltrated all that data. But China was smart and didn't stop there. Around the same time, they also hacked into Anthem, the insurance provider for most government employees. Now, combine the detailed medical records with the list of who has top-level security clearances, and China has gained decades worth of blackmail material that I'm sure they're still using. Government workers and people who use Anthem health insurance aren't alone in broadly having their highly sensitive data available to hostile groups. Other significant hacks have directly affected consumers, such as the hack against Target in 2013 that exposed about 110 million credit card numbers. Or you can think about the Equifax hack in 2017 that exposed the sensitive personal data of at least 148 million Americans. In 2023, we heard about the 23andMe hack exposing the DNA of 7 million of their users. Those are just some of the most egregious breaches. There are hundreds of other known data security violations at companies and organizations that we trust to hold on to our sensitive data. But you may have noticed there are fewer examples I can pull from very recent history. Why don't we hear about these kinds of attacks as much today? Because companies and organizations are keeping their breaches secret as long as possible. Most of the big cybersecurity breaches you've heard about in the news in the last decade happened weeks, months, or more likely years before they were ever reported. It is not in any organization's best interest to admit failure or that their customers' data is no longer safe. So they will do everything in their power to hide breaches, and even when researchers find their data for sale on darknet forums, they'll only admit what they have to. Basically, for every major hack you've heard about, 1,000 never made the news. Additionally, look back into the various fines and settlements that these attacks led to. In that case, you will be shocked, or maybe not if you're jaded like me, to find that none of these companies went out of business. None of them had to pay fines that came close to what they made from cutting security corners. These corner-cutting, profit-bolstering practices are a big part of why privacy as a whole is under constant and severe attack, especially in the United States. We will explore this more in the next section. Why is privacy under attack? At this point, we've covered what privacy protections superficially exist in America and how their weak, outdated language makes our current privacy laws nothing more than words on paper that do almost nothing to protect you. We've also seen how malicious cyber attacks undermine any regulatory protections that should be in place. But what happened in the last few decades that made privacy an afterthought at best? A few things happened that cemented our current state into place. First, companies realized that security and therefore privacy is expensive and difficult to maintain in a fast-moving and constantly changing business environment. Then they realized that the regulations and the regulating bodies that enforce the rules don't really care. Even if they do notice violations, the fines and punishments are minor annoyances at most. Finally, every company in the world realized that nothing matters more than profits and keeping shareholders or the board happy. Now, I will quickly go through the logic behind these issues and why they have decimated any semblance of security or privacy Americans can hope to retain. If you're new here or haven't seen my video about the internet, you won't know that I worked in IT security as a penetration tester, ethical hacker, researcher, and consultant for nearly 20 years. I'll be pulling from that experience in the rest of this section. The statement that security is difficult and expensive is not controversial. Anyone who's ever worked in IT can tell you that. However, a significant change in how corporate America works has led to increasingly small budgets to cover exponentially growing IT infrastructure and expanding security concerns. Why? Well, according to the leadership of most companies, IT is a loss leader. And if they want to keep showing steady quarter-over-quarter growth, they can't very well be pouring money into security or privacy. In the opinion of countless executives, it is much better to hope no one hacks into their system, and if they do, they can deal with it then. Again, think of Equifax, who lost all of our data, and they're still going strong. As you might have guessed, I think this is the worst possible way to run a business, but this isn't all they do. The FTC, the HHS, and any other government body responsible for enforcing and upholding our minimal privacy laws are grossly understaffed, underfunded, and generally have little to no power to make changes. So despite the 4 acts we talked about in the first section being part of the law in America, the organizations who are tasked with actually regulating them are left with paltry budgets and very little legal power, except to issue small fines that amount to accounting errors on a modern corporate budget. Now you see that almost all companies have long since realized that they don't want to spend the money they need to be secure to protect their customers' privacy. They also realize they don't need to spend any of that money because no one will do anything to them if they don't. So why would they? The less money they spend on protecting your privacy and keeping their system secure, the more they can claim as profit each quarter. This is, overall, the most unsustainable approach to the problem we could dream up, and it won't be long before it all comes crashing down. Additionally, in my experience, most, if not all, organizations are compromised in some way. Some don't know it yet, and those that do are just hiding it. Anyway, some terrible things are happening to privacy in America right now, but as I always try to do, I won't leave you with a bad feeling and a bottomless pit of worry in your stomach. I'll wrap this video up with a handful of things you can do to protect your privacy and what we can all do to make the law better protect our privacy. Conclusion: what you can do to protect yourself. Whew, that was a doozy. That was a lot to cover. And I still skimmed over a lot of bits because I didn't want to bore you and I wanted to keep this under 30 minutes. But we learned about these smaller than a handful of laws supposedly designed to protect your privacy. And then we looked at how corporate America and its constant quest for maximum quarterly profits have further eroded any sense of privacy Americans ever had. And then finally, we looked at how our privacy is under constant and powerful attack. To wrap things up today, let us look into a few ways that you can protect yourself and what actions we can take to try to make privacy more than a pipe dream. Like I've said in past videos, common sense is vital to keeping you and your friends and family safe. So you can do a few simple things to improve your security and privacy online. First, update your system and any software regularly. If there's an option to set it to auto-update, select it. Secondly, you need to question everything you see, especially online, because there is an inordinate number of lies, misinformation, and propaganda online, and only vigilance can keep you from falling victim. Finally, if you see something that seems too good to be true, like all those contests on Instagram and Facebook, they are definitely too good to be true. Scams are everywhere, and not all of them are from Nigerian princes. In fact, most of them are from seemingly legitimate businesses. Another step, which will be much more difficult to take in today's world, would be to stop doing everything online. Try shopping at a locally owned store. Try going for a walk in a park, going to a coffee shop and meeting people. And when you do need to do something online, think very carefully about whether you really want to give out your email or your address so you can look at a clickbait article or enter into a marketing campaign designed to look like a contest. Finally, we need to ask our political representatives to do something to better protect American privacy. Ask for new privacy laws modeled on the EU's GDPR standard or even California's Customer Privacy Act to bring America's privacy laws and protections out of the industrial age and into the modern one. What did you think about these concepts? Do you plan to learn more from the resources below? Check out the references and links to related videos and articles in the description to learn more about the topics of this video. If you still need to subscribe to the channel, remember so that you'll get all the new videos to expand your mind and grow your perception.